My boyfriend suffered from depression. Between his medication and therapy sessions, his monthly medical bills came to over $2,000. Desperate to see him get better, I worked myself to the bone, taking on endless drawing commissions and running delivery gigs day and night. My friends constantly warned me that I was going to burn myself out. That was until the day I picked up a delivery order destined for an exclusive, upscale neighborhood. I respectfully handed over the order with both hands. A premium Japanese meal that cost nearly $400. But the moment I looked up, I saw him standing in the doorway, staring back at me in utter shock. He was supposed to be at his therapy session. Chapter 1. Aren't you supposed to be at the clinic, Julian? I stared at the elegantly and luxuriously decorated house, my left hand gripping the takeout bag so tightly it ached. It was nearly 100 degrees outside, yet I felt like I had been plunged into an ice cellar, shivering uncontrollably. I had only ever seen places like this on television. I'm sorry, Serena. Please let me explain. My therapist had a sudden emergency this afternoon. I'm just here hanging out at a friend's place. Caught red-handed, Julian lost his composure and nervously grabbed my sleeve. This was his go-to move whenever he apologized. It used to work like a charm every time, but at this moment, it meant absolutely nothing. I coldly slapped his hand away. He was wearing a custom-tailored shirt from some brand I couldn't even name, which was deeply ironic. It suited his aura of someone who had never lacked for anything far better than his usual cheap clothes ever did. Lowering my eyes, I pulled out my phone and tapped into the clinic's booking page. Seeing that his therapist clearly still had open slots for the afternoon, I lost whatever lingering interest I had in calling out his lies. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my thoughts and spoke with eerie calmness. Are you having fun, Julian? Playing the role of a destitute, down-on-his-luck boy who couldn't even bear to buy himself a cup of coffee, when in reality, you're a rich kid who casually drops nearly $400 on a single meal. My lips trembled as I glared bitterly at the man standing in front of me, completely unaware of when my eyes had brimmed with tears. You really played me for an absolute fool. $400. I have to run 40 or 50 deliveries to make that. It takes me weeks of running around. The most ridiculous part was the only app left open in my phone's background. It was a message I had sent him just half an hour ago. I had told him I wanted to treat us to a nice dinner tonight, planning to make his favorite tomato and beef stew. I was able to do that because the customer in this ritzy neighborhood had been incredibly generous, leaving a $20 tip. I just never expected that this tip was a handout from Julian himself. Chapter 2. In the dead of night, Julian used to hold me close and whisper that out of everything in the world, my love was the only thing he would never doubt. He claimed that even his parents' love wasn't as pure as mine. Those intimate words once filled me with joy, making me feel like a lucky winner in a world where genuine affection was a rare commodity. Looking back now, I realized no one else would be stupid enough to risk heatstroke running deliveries in brutal weather just for an extra $5 severe weather bonus. Also, I could scrape together his medical fees a little sooner. It's been so long since I last slept for more than 5 hours, and I've been dreaming of the day you'd finally get better. You knew all of this better than anyone, didn't you? My demanding voice gradually broke into a choke. A crack appeared in Julian's previously composed expression, and with slightly red eyes, he nodded. Living in that cramped, run-down apartment, it took half an hour just to walk to the nearest bus stop. He watched me exhaust myself, watched me pinch every single penny. He watched me struggle, desperately paying for his twisted little poverty simulation game just to fund the treatment for his fabricated depression. Throughout it all, he observed with the cold detachment of a creator watching his subjects. I'll wire you some money to make up for it. I was wrong to do this to you. Julian lowered his head slightly, his eyes filled with guilt and a trace of helplessness. Realizing he couldn't lie his way out of this anymore, he simply gave up trying. With stiff fingers, I fished the crumpled receipt out of my pocket, a long, winding strip listing all the most expensive dishes on the menu. I balled it up and hurled it at him with all my might. He didn't dodge it, his expression a mix of sorrow and remorse. The blast of indoor air conditioning offered a hint of coolness, and beneath the sound of cicadas, footsteps approached from nearby. Following the footsteps came the whiny, flirtatious voice of a woman. Julian, haven't you gotten the food yet? I'm starving to death over here. Chapter 3. The standoff between us broke as his expression shifted subtly. As we both turned to look, a young woman wearing a lace slip dress walked toward us. Julian stepped forward in a panic to block her path, saying, "Why did you come out here? I'm heading back in right now. Be a good girl and go back inside." But the girl seemed determined to see what was going on. Bypassing him, she looked at me with a smile, her almond-shaped eyes flashing with a mix of recognition and sheer disdain. "And who is this?" No one answered. Seeing our mutual silence, the corners of her mouth curled up into a smirk. She then naturally hooked her arm through Julian's and casually tugged down the edge of her sheer, pale pink nightgown. The red marks on her neck and the curves beneath the fabric were put on full display. She leaned against him, her entire body soft and yielding. The man's uneasy gaze fell on me. In utter despair, I turned my head away and gently closed my eyes. My sweat-soaked hair clung uncomfortably to my face, and my temples throbbed with a rhythmic, pounding pain. No matter how dense I could be, it was brutally clear what had just happened between them. I originally thought I was just the unfortunate collateral damage in a rich kid's poverty simulation game, but now it seemed I was also just the spicy little distraction in his high society romance. What a string of incredibly bad luck. Having absolutely no desire to stay a second longer, I turned around to pack up my delivery bag and leave. But the girl suddenly called out to stop me. "Hold on. Are you by any chance that little side piece Julian has been playing with? I didn't recognize you in that delivery uniform. You're Serena Avery from the art school, aren't you?" Chapter 4. I paused my movements and turned back to look at her. After half a minute of staring, I finally placed her. She was Camilla Holt, a student a year ahead of me. The girl with an elite family background and stunning looks, constantly surrounded by an entourage of admirers. But there was bad blood between us. Because she had pulled strings behind the scenes to snatch the financial aid spot I had applied for and give it to someone else, I never fawned over her like everyone else did. Noticing my dark, stiff expression, Camilla tightened her grip on Julian's arm. Feigning delight, she spoke in a saccharine voice. "Oh, Julian, I can't believe it. Last year, I casually complained to you about this annoying underclassman who acted all high and mighty. You asked a few questions, and you actually went and ruined Serena for me. I have to hand it to you. That was quite the brilliant move." Raising her eyes to shoot me a vicious glare, Camilla continued. "So brilliant that you managed to play our college's famously brilliant student like an absolute fiddle." My hands, hanging limply by my sides, slowly balled into fists. The cold air spilling out of the house washed over me, but it brought absolutely no relief to the suffocating heat in my chest. To these people, the futures, feelings, finances, and sweat of ordinary folks were nothing but annoying weeds by the side of the road. Not only to be ignored, but to be trampled on and spat upon. Camilla leaned in and kissed his cheek, a twisted reward for making a fool out of me, before shooting me a provocative, triumphant glance. Then, as if suddenly remembering something, her expression twisted into something manic and bizarre as she asked a question. "Serena, did Julian tell you he had depression?" I furrowed my brows, offering no denial. Seeing my reaction, the woman standing before me instantly doubled over with laughter. But the words that spilled from her mouth sent an icy chill down to my very bones. "That's because I told him about your little brother who committed suicide because of depression. I told him that as long as he claimed to have depression, your brainless self would fall for it instantly. And would you look at that? I was right." Chapter 5. As her words hung in the air, there was a momentary standstill, leaving only the sound of cicadas echoing around us. My mind went completely blank, the last thread of my sanity snapping. Biting hard on my lower lip, I grabbed my delivery helmet and furiously smashed it into Julian. If I could swallow this kind of humiliation, I might as well resign myself to being a mindless beast of burden for the rest of my life. My chest heaving violently, I screamed at him. "Depression, huh? Playing poor, huh? You love poking at people's deepest wounds, don't you? You absolutely deserve the fact that your parents don't love you. You deserve having to watch your dad beat the crap out of your mom. Honestly, it's a shame he didn't beat you to death too. But don't worry, I'll finish the job for him today." During the year we spent together, whether it was all an act or there were moments of genuine emotion, We had shared our deepest vulnerabilities with one another. That was how I knew his greatest, most inescapable trauma was his parents' coldness and neglect, leaving him entirely devoid of familial love growing up. And in that moment, it became my ultimate weapon to verbally assault and curse him. Before either of them could process what was happening, I hurled the helmet at his face again and again, striking him brutally. Overcome by rage and gasping heavily for air, my chronic lack of sleep finally caught up with me, making my head spin wildly. The absolute second Camilla brought up Jeremy, the self-control I had been desperately holding onto all afternoon completely shattered. He was my weak spot. No one was allowed to touch his memory. Julian didn't fight back once, taking every blow until Camilla finally managed to drag me away. He covered his mouth, his hands stained with blood. "Are you okay, Julian? I'm calling the police right now. This crazy bitch has a death wish, daring to lay a hand on you. I'm going to have my dad." Camilla's furious voice was laced with frantic tears, but Julian grabbed her hand and shook his head. "No, don't. I owe her this." He straightened out his messy hair and walked over to stand in front of me. Pulling a gold bank card from his pocket, he offered it out to me. "The pin is your birthday. I know things are beyond fixing now, but never mind. I'm sorry." I let out a cold laugh, the look in my eyes devoid of anything but freezing hatred as I stared back at him. "Go drop dead." I violently snatched the gold card from between his fingers, leaving him with those final words as I turned on my heel and walked away. Chapter 6. There was $80,000 on the card. After demanding my final paycheck from my delivery platform boss, I quit the job immediately. I returned to that tiny apartment, barely 300 square feet, where you could see from one end to the other in a single glance. We originally moved out of the college dorms because he claimed his symptoms were worsening and he desperately needed me by his side every single day. To be honest, when he first barged headlong into my life, I wasn't entirely without my guard, but seeing him display the exact same symptoms as my brother had ultimately softened my heart and clouded my judgment. In all the chaos, I couldn't even tell anymore if my feelings for him had been primarily rooted in romantic love or in a desperate urge to make amends out of an infinite well of guilt toward my brother. I had just wildly, obsessively wanted to help cure him. It felt like, if I could just save him, the nightmares I couldn't escape would finally start to fade. Truth be told, a year was a long time, and we had accumulated quite a bit of stuff. But looking at all those matching couple items felt like staring directly into the sun, so I ended up tossing every last piece of it straight into the garbage. Listening to the rattling whir of the old air conditioner and staring blankly at the ceiling, my exhaustion from endless days and nights of labor finally dragged me down into a deep slumber. In my dreams, I saw Jeremy lying in that bathtub for what felt like the millionth time. He lay there drained of color in a pool of crimson liquid, his entire body as porcelain white and lifeless as a doll, utterly devoid of warmth and breath. An empty pill bottle rested by his drooping fingertips, and the curve of his slightly parted, long eyelashes looked exactly as it did back in the days when he used to doze off waiting for me to finish studying. Only this time, he would never open his eyes again, never rub the sleep from them to groggily ask me when I was going to bed. On his phone, he had wiped his chat histories with everyone else, leaving behind only one final message for me. "I'm sorry, sis," along with a cash transfer of $347.23. That was every single cent he had to his name. It had been a beautiful spring that year, yet Jeremy, who always seemed like heaven's favorite child, chose that exact season to leave this world behind. And because of that, I remained trapped forever in that spring. Chapter 7. The rustling sound of a plastic bag near the door jolted me awake. A man in a black button-down shirt was crouched by the trash can, suspiciously digging through it. "Who is it?" The man paused his movements and slowly turned around. It was Julian. He was still wearing a face mask, and several bandages were plastered across his face. I massaged my throbbing forehead, suddenly remembering that he still had a key to the apartment. All the matching couple rings, mugs, watches, souvenirs, and everything else I had thrown away that afternoon had been fished out and neatly arranged on the floor. "What are you doing with those?" Hearing my voice, Julian lowered his eyes, making it impossible to read his expression. I just came to pack up some last things to take with me. They're just a bunch of cheap trinkets. I'm surprised a rich heir like you would even want them. Sitting up in bed, I glanced around the room to see if there was anything important left. Since things had ended up like this, I planned to move back into the college dorms and terminate the lease on this place. Holding that worthless silver couple's ring in his hand, Julian gently rubbed his thumb over the metal, his voice dropping into a lonely, quiet register. Serena, I know you don't believe me, but I was genuinely serious about us. You are the only person I truly trust. No one has ever loved me with such absolute sincerity, and I refuse to let you go. I waved a hand dismissively and let out a mocking laugh. My head hung low as the painfully ironic scene from the afternoon replayed in my mind. Serious about what, exactly? Because you loved me so much. You specifically orchestrated it so I would be the one delivering your food? Am I supposed to thank you for that? I can explain the thing with Camilla. We never slept together, and getting together with her was just something I carelessly agreed to in the past. I've been meaning to break it off with her for a long time anyway, because I've realized the person I truly love is. There's no point in discussing this anymore. I cut him off coldly, my eyes dead and apathetic. Water dripped steadily from the bathroom sink into the plastic bucket. The knee-high faucet had leaked year-round, and to save a little money on the water bill, I always kept a bucket under it to catch the drops. All that penny pinching only ever amounted to a few measly bucks, so to hear him talk about sincere love was laughably absurd. The very moment his scam was exposed, regardless of whether his feelings were real or fake, an unbridgeable chasm had opened up between us. Honestly, Julian, when you used my brother's tragedy to get close to me, did it ever cross your mind that this karma would boomerang right back and hit you? What do you mean by that? I didn't bother answering him. I just knitted my brows and opened the front door, gesturing for him to get out. Seeing the absolute finality in my expression, a flash of hurt crossed his features. He shoved the items from the floor haphazardly into his bag and stood up. Stop pretending you have depression. Because for every person like you who fakes it, the stigma surrounding the disease only grows worse, making it even harder for actual patients to get the help they need. And as a result, the world ends up with more people like Jeremy. After a long moment of silence, the man standing before me slowly nodded. Then, reaching behind the door, Julian pulled out a grocery bag containing tomatoes and beef ribs. He had evidently seen my message about making us a nice dinner. Could you make me tomato and beef stew one last time? No. Your personal chef can make it much better. I only like the way you make it. Serena, why can't you just trust me this one time? Please, just give me one more chance. His voice caught in his throat, choking with emotion. I had never expected to see an expression of genuine pleading on the face of the usually high and mighty Julian Weston. At this moment, none of his actions fit the parameters of his little poverty roleplay anymore. But regardless of the truth or falsehood of his words, I remained entirely unmoved, wrapped in complete silence. Understanding my rejection, he reached out as if to grab my hand, but ultimately let his arm fall back to his side. Right before stepping out the door, his eyes red-rimmed, he turned back to look at me one last time. Do you still love me? No. Could you ever love me again? Never. Chapter 8. After he left, I started packing up my belongings. My plan was to move back to the university dorms by the following week. Having sorted through things well past midnight, I collapsed onto the sofa, my eyes naturally drawn to a trunk tucked away in the corner of the closet. It was locked shut. It contained the belongings Jeremy had left behind. He and I were twins. After our parents divorced, they both went on to start brand new families. We were treated like incredibly costly mistakes from their reckless youth. Nobody wanted to foot the bill, and nobody wanted to look back at us. So, from middle school onward, the two of us survived by leaning entirely on each other, surviving off a pathetically meager amount of child support. Thinking about all this made my chest ache unbearably, and my hand clamped tightly around a small jewelry box. It was the birthday gift Jeremy had given me the year he died, a hexagram necklace encrusted with tiny, crushed diamonds. He had smiled so brightly when he gave it to me, even fastening it around my neck with his own hands. I bought this with money I earned myself, you know. Do you like it? My big sister looks so beautiful wearing it, way prettier than any model. I know this one isn't super expensive, but I'm going to work so hard until I can drape you in all the most beautiful gems in the world." The young boy's eyes had been so earnest. I had poked his single dimple and nodded with a proud, comforting smile. "I believed you, Jeremy, which is why I've been waiting all this time." As I moved the jewelry box, something rattled beneath the foam insert. Lifting it up, I discovered a key hidden underneath. When he gifted this to me the year before last, that key definitely wasn't in there, which meant he must have slipped it inside later on. I pulled it out, pondering for a moment before my gaze shifted back to the chipped trunk sitting in the corner. The lock clicked open. Inside, there were exactly 4 items. An oil painting depicting a field of withered sunflowers, a vinyl record from his favorite band, the Grey Herons, a diary, and a slip of paper with a username and password written on it. My eyes locked onto the black diary. I picked it up and rested it on my lap. Flipping through from the very beginning, the early entries were filled with nothing but mundane daily routines and notes about which girl at school had confessed her feelings to him that week. It made sense. He had always been incredibly handsome, with fair skin and deeply expressive eyes, all wrapped in an aura of aloof nobility. Growing up, I had acted as the middleman for a mountain of love letters and snacks sent his way. But perhaps because we shared the trauma of being abandoned so early in life, no matter how much adoration he received from others, he remained deeply sensitive and observant, which was likely why he picked up the habit of journaling in the first place. Once he started college, his naturally gifted singing voice quickly made him the lead vocalist of the university band, drawing crowds of screaming girls to every single performance. As I read, sinking deeper into the memories, my fingertips suddenly stopped on a specific page, because Camilla's name had inexplicably appeared in his diary. And as the entries went on, her name started showing up with increasing frequency. Chapter 9. Truthfully, I knew full well that returning to campus wasn't going to be a walk in the park. After all, given that I had physically attacked Julian, there was absolutely zero chance Camilla would just let the matter go. I just didn't expect her retaliation to arrive quite so fast. I stared at my designated dorm bed, which was currently buried underneath a mountain of garbage, while crude insults, calling me a slut and a home-wrecking bitch, were scrawled across the wall underneath the bed frame in bright red paint. Megan, a classmate I was on decent terms with, stood next to me looking completely at a loss. "Serena, I tried to stop them, but they wouldn't listen. They said you messed with someone you never should have crossed." She gently took the trash I was holding, her tone heavy with guilt. I offered her a reassuring smile and went back to cleaning up the mess on my bed. "Also, Serena, have you checked the school forum? People are posting that you were the third party who broke up Camilla and Julian from the engineering department. There are hundreds of comments dragging you, and the evidence they posted looks pretty convincing. Is any of it actually true?" I stopped wiping down my bedboard, frowned, and took her phone to quickly scroll through the thread. Most of it was just photos of Julian and me walking around campus, paired with screenshots of chat logs meant to prove that he and Camilla had secretly been together since the summer of our freshman year without ever going public. I let out a scoff of absolute disbelief. They clearly just wanted to destroy my reputation, deciding this was the perfect moment to retroactively claim they were a couple just to smear dirt on my name. It was perfectly engineered to make any outsider looking at the timeline conclude that I was undeniably the homewrecker. I didn't bother answering Megan's question about whether it was true. Instead, after a brief moment of thought, I pulled out my phone and dialed Camilla's number. She picked up on the third ring. I cut straight to the chase. "It's Serena Avery. Meet me at the coffee shop near campus at 3 p.m. The background laughter on her end abruptly stopped, and she let out a mocking sneer. Well, look who it is. If you're calling because you regret what you did and want to apologize, it's way too late for that. I don't have the free time to entertain, eh? It's about Jeremy." Cut off mid-sentence, Camilla swallowed whatever nasty insults she was about to spit out. After a long, heavy silence, she finally replied, "I'll be there." Chapter 10. Though the 3 p.m. sun wasn't quite as brutal as high noon, it still beat down mercilessly. I stirred the latte in my cup and took a small sip. My mind kept replaying the fragmented sentences written about her in my brother's diary. Just then, the wind chimes above the coffee shop door rang out. The sharp click-clack of high heels approached and stopped directly in front of me. Camilla was wearing a blue and white slip dress, and this was the very first time I had looked her directly in the face. She possessed small, cute features, yet her eyes constantly harbored a dark hostility that completely clashed with her overall aesthetic. Lowering my gaze, I clicked my tongue internally. She still just disgusted me. She sat down across from me, dropping her designer handbag onto the seat, and immediately asked her question. What about him? I didn't waste time with small talk, diving straight into the point. You used to be in love with him, didn't you? Her hand, which had been reaching for a menu, froze midair. An instant later, the fingers sporting pinkish-purple manicured nails gripped the laminated edge tightly. A flash of profound grief passed through her eyes, but she masked it perfectly within 2 seconds. Where on earth did you hear a ridiculous rumor like that? As if I would ever fall for. What a joke. Her tone was as domineering as ever, but the forced smirk on her face looked incredibly unnatural. Your name shows up constantly in his diary. He wrote that you confessed your feelings to him 27 times. I slowly set down the stirring spoon, looking straight at her with an absolute, unquestionable certainty. The rich aroma of roasted coffee beans filled the air around us, the baristas still bustling away in the back kitchen at this hour. Camilla's pupils contracted slightly. She opened her mouth as if to argue, but caught herself, ultimately choosing not to offer another denial. She propped her forehead against her right hand and lowered her eyelashes, refusing to meet my gaze. Her complete avoidance and failure to respond head-on struck a raw nerve inside me, prompting me to slide the canvas I had brought along onto the table. It was one of Jeremy's final belongings, the painting covered in dead sunflowers, titled Withered. So, if you loved him so much, why did you plagiarize his artwork? Why did you hack into the system to steal his competition slot? Do you have any idea how important that competition was to him? He had loved singing and painting more than anything else since he was a little boy. Exactly 10 days after his painting Withered was stolen, he took his own life. And the person who stole it was none other than Camilla. She turned her head, her eyes locking onto the painting I had framed, and a sudden, violent hatred flared up in her expression. And, even after he died, you still found it amusing to torture his family. Camilla, if this is what your love looks like. Her chest suddenly began heaving violently, her emotions spiraling totally out of control as if the word love had physically stabbed her. She grabbed her glass of water and viciously smashed it into the floor. Shooting up from her chair like a madwoman, with bloodshot eyes, she screamed at me. What the hell do you know? You call yourself his sister, but what did you ever actually understand about him? What gives you the right to question my love for him? Yes, I loved him. It was the very first time in my life I had ever loved someone like that, and I gave him absolutely everything I had to give. I bought him stacks of vinyls from his favorite bands, and when I didn't know what kind of sneakers he liked, I just bought every single pair to give him. His shooter games made me dizzy and nauseous, but I still learned how to play them from scratch just so we would have something to talk about. Whether it was my money or my heart, I practically handed it to him on my hands and knees. What could you possibly understand? When had I ever been so pathetic and subservient to anyone in my entire life? I didn't even care that he rejected me 27 times. I genuinely didn't care. I was ready to keep trying forever, because I loved him so much. Camilla collapsed back onto the sofa, sobbing hysterically, her voice wrecked and raspy. She stared at me with profound desperation as tears endlessly streamed down her face. But seeing her like this completely shattered the tenuous control I had over my own emotions, churning up a massive storm inside my chest. Her confession made the truth even more incomprehensible, pushing me to interrogate her further. Then why? Why did you steal his work? Did you know that 10 days after that competition ended, he was gone? Do you know how deep his wounds were when he killed himself? How absolutely resolved he was to die? Tell me, Camilla, aren't you one of the murderers who drove him to it? My mounting panic made it hard to breathe, and the nightmarish images of his death forcefully flooded my mind once again. Faced with my accusations, Camilla's lips trembled wordlessly, her eyes entirely clouded with bewilderment. Shaking all over, she pulled a slim cigarette from her purse, but just as she went to light it, an employee rushed over to stop her. Choosing instead to violently crush the unlit cigarette into pieces, she finally spoke. That weekend, He went to play at a commercial gig I had recommended to him, but when he came back, he was like a completely different person. When I asked him how the show went, he looked at me like he wanted to murder me. He told me I was the most disgusting, detestable person alive. He called me an animal, called me a bitch. Whenever I close my eyes, I can still see the way he pointed his finger at me and screamed those insults. You have no idea how utterly destroyed I felt, like my heart was suffocating in my chest. I had absolutely no idea what had happened. My dad had just mentioned that people from entertainment agencies would be at that gig, and that record labels were looking to sign him. It was an incredible opportunity, so I secretly tipped Jeremy off. But the second it was over, he pushed me away like he was sentencing me to death. I have my own pride, too. It was one thing for him not to love me back, but why did he have to humiliate me like that? After that day, I forced myself to stop loving him, and I even wanted to get revenge on him. She choked on her sobs, unable to finish the sentence. But anyone could figure out the rest. Unrequited love so easily curdles into blazing hatred. Just like she had pointed out, a girl who grew up surrounded by endless adulation was used to getting whatever she wanted. If she couldn't have him no matter how hard she tried, then she was going to destroy him entirely. Which was exactly why her hatred for him hadn't evaporated upon his death. Instead, it had spilled over onto me, stealing my scholarship, sending Julian to toy with my emotions. It was all just an extension of her vengeance. How do you even know about what happened between us? You were the most precious thing in the world to him, weren't you? He kept you completely in the dark about everything except his good news, absolutely terrified of causing you a single ounce of worry. Honestly, I'm jealous of you, jealous that he cared about you that much. The ice cubes in my glass had slowly melted away, causing some of the latte to drip down the sides. I rubbed the calluses on my palms, vividly recalling Jeremy's delicate, elegant handwriting. I read the diary he left behind. So, did he just hate me all along? Or did he ever, even for a split second, have feelings for me? That's a question I can't answer for him. Hearing my response, all the light drained from her eyes, and even the hatred completely dissolved. In the diary, that commercial gig was indeed mentioned right around the time he had viciously cursed her out. And immediately following that entry, the tone of his journal took a horrifying turn away from his usual everyday joys and sorrows. It turned into page after solid page of just a single phrase. Richard Holt deserves to die. He had pressed down so violently that the ink bled through the pages, every single stroke looking like it was trying to rip the man to shreds. It was a level of hatred that defied words or description. But beyond that one recurring sentence, he had left no other details, leaving me entirely clueless about the cause. Raising my eyes to look at the devastated girl sitting across from me, I asked my final question. I have one last thing to ask you. Richard Holt. He's your father, isn't he? The one on the university board of directors. Pulled from her stupor, Camilla looked thoroughly confused by the seemingly random question, but she nodded anyway. Yes, he's my dad. Chapter 11. The controversy on the school forum was still gaining traction, and on my walk back to the dorms, plenty of passing students were pointing and whispering about me. My mind was so consumed with thoughts of Jeremy that I completely failed to react when someone purposefully shoulder-checked me. A tall figure instantly stepped between us, shielding me. Watch where the hell you're going. I turned my head. It was Julian, wearing a baseball cap and screaming at the person who had just shoved me. His outburst caused even more bystanders to stop and stare. Some even pulled out their phones, snapping photos directly at our faces. I can't believe those two have the nerve to show their faces together. Absolutely shameless, a homewrecker and a cheater. Ignoring the buzzing gossip around us, I frowned and looked at him. What are you doing here? He lowered his gaze, his eyes full of deep concern as he spoke in a low voice. I already posted a clarification thread explaining that you were completely innocent and had no idea about any of it. But I was still worried someone might try to attack you, exactly like what just happened. Rubbing my aching shoulder, I shot him a dark glare, as if he didn't realize exactly who had brought all this misery down upon me in the first place. Have you, over the last couple of days, have you? Before he could finish his hesitant sentence, a sharp rock suddenly flew through the air, hurtling straight toward my head. Julian noticed it a split second before I did. instantly lunging forward to block my body with his own. I whipped my head toward the direction it had come from, only to see a guy in a denim jacket quickly melting away into the crowd, vanishing from sight. Even with his quick reflexes, the rock still grazed Julian's cheek, leaving behind a streak of blood. He clutched his face in pain, the corner of his mouth twitching upwards into a slight grimace as his eyes continually flicked back to me. It felt like he was intentionally waiting for me to comfort him. Sighing deeply internally, I spoke to him in a low, flat voice. "You don't need to go out of your way to do things like this, Julian. There is absolutely no chance for us. No matter what you do, I am never turning back." The tiny glimmer of hope that had been shining in his eyes fully extinguished. Yet, almost as if trying to soothe himself, he mumbled under his breath, "I'm not going to give up. What exactly are you still obsessing over?" I honestly couldn't comprehend it. Why would someone who manipulated genuine love for sport still be so hung up on his mistakes, instead of just moving on to hunt for his next victim? I have never felt pain or regret like this before in my entire life, and I don't know why. It's a completely foreign feeling to me. All I know is that I love you and I feel incredibly guilty for what I did to you. So just getting to see you or do things for you makes me feel a little bit better. He laid his feelings bare. Yet in that exact moment, under the glow of the streetlights, the silver ring on his left middle finger just gleamed with a cheap, tacky shine. Just like our entire year together. A massive mistake, and completely worthless in the end. Chapter 12. The post accusing me of being a homewrecker was deleted by its author deep in the middle of the night. The barrage of insults that had completely flooded the forum had been entirely wiped clean by morning. After that incident, Camilla never targeted me again. My days returned to their usual peaceful rhythm, marred only by Julian's daily, agonizing attempts to bother me. It was yet another sleepless night. I logged in using the username and password my brother had left behind. It was his Instagram art account, boasting over 300,000 followers. Within that specific niche, he had been somewhat of a minor celebrity. His handle was Briar. From the time he was a little boy, he had displayed staggering, innate talent in both drawing and music. Even though we grew up in tight financial circumstances and I couldn't provide him with the best resources, he had still managed to shine as brightly as he possibly could. Swiping down the screen, I browsed through his older posts. His earliest works mostly featured fluffy little animals and beautiful scenes of nature. But the stylistic shift occurred exactly at that same timeline, the second semester of his freshman year. Directly following that commercial gig, his art completely changed. The fluffy animals morphed into pitch black, gargantuan monsters that swallowed him whole and tore him limb from limb. Looking back now, everything from that period had unraveled so terrifyingly fast. From the moment I found out he was taking antidepressants to the day he died, barely 2 months had passed. During that time, he became violently irritable and emotionally unhinged. I had tried to check in on him countless times, only to be completely shut out. Shocked and powerless, I had no choice but to give him the space he demanded. When he so abruptly decided to end his life, my sheer despair and bewilderment left me desperately clawing for an explanation. But everywhere I turned, everyone simply repeated that suicide caused by depression was the only answer there was. Did you hear about Jeremy from the art school? Rumor has it he committed suicide recently because of his depression. Oh my God, really? Of course it's real. The university has been throwing mental health seminars back-to-back lately specifically because of it. Those were the exact words I had overheard 2 girls discussing as I walked back to my dorm, right after I had just finished arranging my brother's funeral. Faced with the seemingly undeniable facts presented to me, I began to numb myself and surrender to that narrative. I even slowly came to accept it as his true cause of death, ceasing my fight for alternative answers. But now, his belongings had ripped open an entirely new wound. I pulled my scattered thoughts back to the present. My roommate's breathing rose and fell steadily in the dark. My finger paused at scrolling, and I tapped into the direct messages on his account. The vast majority of them were just fans begging for new uploads. When he had first stopped posting, huge crowds of people had messaged him daily to demand updates. But now, 2 years after his passing, hardly anyone even remembered the account Briar anymore. That was until I spotted one specific user with a winter landscape profile picture and the handle @Creek. She had been sending a continuous stream of direct messages for 2 solid years, all beginning immediately after his death. They contained confessions of love, agonizing tears, bitter indignation, and profound regret. Reading through them, I realized she was also a student at Harwick University, and her most recent message read, "I'm so sorry, Jeremy. I finally found out the truth, but I have absolutely no way to avenge you." Right as I read that line, her previously grayed-out avatar suddenly lit up. She was online. I immediately sent her a message. "I am the account owner's older sister, Serena Avery. Can we meet up?" A few seconds later, she responded, "Okay." Chapter 13. She asked to meet me on the grassy field by the campus track later that night. Sophie was wearing a plain black dress, and the moment she spotted me, a glimmer of light broke through her gloomy eyes. She recognized me instantly, and I recognized her too. There was no mistaking the tiny mole right between her eyebrows. She had been one of Jeremy's classmates in high school, and she had once asked me to pass along a gift to him. A hand-copied guitar tab. It had contained the sheet music for his favorite song, Last August. The reason she had left such a deep impression on me was because out of all the presents he received that year, that was the only one that genuinely made his eyes light up. It had been his absolute favorite. Sophie sat cross-legged on the grass beside me, a soft smile playing on her lips as she watched a circle of freshmen singing songs nearby. I used to sit right here all the time and watch him sing. The crowds that surrounded him back then were so much bigger than this one. I always had to scan through the entire mob just to find a tiny gap where I could catch a glimpse of his side profile. Her eyes were brimming with nostalgia, and her voice was impossibly soft and tender. It felt like time had rewound to 2 years ago, back when he would sit right in the middle of this field, strumming his guitar and singing the love songs he had written himself. But as the ambient noise around us grew louder, the look on her face grew increasingly hollow. I regret it so much. I've been secretly in love with him for 6 years now. I followed him all the way here to Harwick, but right up until the day he died, I never even got the chance to formally confess how I felt. Just if he had known there was one more person in this world who loved him. Do you think his desire to leave would have faded, even just a little bit? Choking on her tears, Sophie spilled her agonizing secrets to me. I reached out and patted her shoulder, wanting to offer her some shred of comfort. But to my horror, she was terrifyingly thin, feeling like nothing but skin and bones. Turning her gaze back toward the crowd, her expression suddenly went completely icy and dead calm, as if she had just remembered something crucial. "Do you know Richard Holt from the University Board of Directors?" My heart skipped a violent beat, and I gave her a small nod. "He's the one who killed Jeremy." During that commercial gig in the second semester of his freshman year, I actually went to the venue. I was planning to stop him after the show to finally confess my feelings, but I ended up watching him and his bandmates get into Richard Holt's car. Holt lied to him, saying that a record label was interested in signing the band and invited them all out for dinner to talk about it. But after that, her voice trembled uncontrollably as she recounted the events. As the evening breeze whipped at the hem of her dress, I could feel her entire body physically shaking next to me. Wrapping her arms tightly around herself, the tears began pouring out of her unstoppably. After he died, I started secretly investigating Richard Holt. My intuition kept screaming that he was involved somehow. I found out he frequently dined with the other board members at the Aldervale Hotel. So I got a part-time job there, and I worked there for 2 entire years. 2 full years, until I finally managed to record a confession while he was drunk. She dropped her head and frantically rummaged through her bag for her phone, moving so violently that a pill bottle tumbled out onto the grass. I froze. Once I realized what the bottle was, my nose stung with a brutal wave of sudden sorrow. I knew exactly what those pills were meant to treat. Jeremy had taken them, and I had even bought them for Julian. With skeletal, shaking hands, she pulled up an audio file and handed me a single earbud. At first, it was just noisy background chatter, several men aggressively brown-nosing each other. Then, a deep male voice cut through the noise. The one that practically delivered himself to my door this time was incredibly boring. "You're just way too picky, Richard. I thought that little male actor looked fantastic, but he still wasn't good enough for you. He doesn't even come close. I'm not gonna lie, out of all these years, My absolute favorite was still that lead singer from the band. I'd had my eye on him for a long time, ever since the freshman orientation party. Later on, I had to trick him by saying a record label was going to sign his whole band just to get him to show up. I had to pump him full of so much alcohol before I could finally drag him into bed. But man, it was totally worth it. Wait, who are you talking about? The one who ended up killing himself later on. What was his name? Avery? Oh, right, Jeremy Avery. His suicide definitely gave me a good scare. I had to immediately order the university to set up all those mental health seminars to cover it up. He was way too fragile to handle it, really. Otherwise, I would have totally brought him around for you guys to play with too. The rowdy background noise slowly faded away, leaving only the faint hiss of static playing in my earbud. It wasn't until I tasted the metallic tang of blood in my mouth that I finally snapped back to reality. My chest was heaving so violently that my brain felt completely starved of oxygen, rendering me physically unable to speak. Trembling, I dug a plastic bag out of my purse and clamped it tightly over my nose and mouth. While rushing Jeremy to the hospital that terrible day, I had suffered from this exact same delirious shortness of breath. The doctor had diagnosed it as respiratory alkalosis, telling me that in a real emergency, breathing into a plastic bag was the fastest way to recover. I had memorized that fact ever since. Noticing my terrifying physical state, Sophie hastily stuffed her phone away, crouched down, and hovered anxiously by my side. As my mind slowly began to clear again, I was finally able to piece together the entire, horrifying picture of what my brother had endured. The monstrous transformations in his diary entries and his artwork, his sudden, vile outburst at Camilla, his abrupt plunge into a complete mental breakdown, and his absolute, unshakable determination to die. It all finally made horrifyingly perfect sense. Once she saw the lucidity returning to my eyes, Sophie simply couldn't hold it back anymore. She threw her arms tightly around my neck and began wailing in absolute agony. But what are we supposed to do? Even with this recording, we can't possibly fight Richard Holt. He has too much money and power in Hartwell. We're completely and utterly powerless. My brother must have felt that exact same paralyzing despair back then. What chance did ordinary people have against monsters sitting at the absolute pinnacle of power? Was the only option truly to just swallow the abuse and keep living? A single audio recording and a victim who is already dead could never, ever form a legally solid chain of evidence. And even if Richard Holt magically did end up getting sentenced, would whatever meager punishment he received actually be enough to pay for what he did? More likely than not, he would easily slip away entirely unscathed. I raised my head to look up at the night sky, watching as thick storm clouds slowly swallowed the moon. Lowering my eyes, I wiped away her tears and forced a deeply encouraging smile onto my face. You've suffered so much over these past 2 years. On Jeremy's behalf, I want to say thank you. Thank you for loving him for all this time. Chapter 14. After that night ended, I was consumed by an unyielding high fever, my waking moments and my dreams violently blurring together in a chaotic haze of nightmares. Finally, right after handing in my final project for a major course, I collapsed unconscious outside the classroom door and was rushed to the hospital. I jolted violently awake from a dream where Jeremy was crying tears of blood, screaming at me and demanding to know why I had abandoned him at home all by himself. I had suffered through dozens of dreams like that, each one starring a brand new scenario but delivering the exact same soul-crushing agony. Under the dim, yellowish glow of the hospital lights, my head pounding with vicious intensity, I peeled open my painfully dry eyes. I saw a silhouette sitting right next to my bed. He was wearing a blue and white button-down shirt, his gaze locked intensely onto my face. The second he realized I was finally awake, his eyes instantly flushed blood red. Julian picked up a glass of warm water from the nightstand and gently helped me sit up. My throat was so parched it hurt, and I greedily drained the entire glass in just 2 or 3 massive gulps. The doctor said you have a viral infection. Why have you been neglecting your health so badly? He asked the question, but I didn't say a word back. What exactly happened to you? I just stared blankly up at the ceiling, still offering no response whatsoever. I simply tuned him out completely. Over the course of the next entire month, Julian stayed firmly planted by my side day and night, meticulously and obsessively tending to my every possible need. In the beginning, he still tried asking me questions every now and then, but my absolute, unyielding silence eventually caused him to give up trying to talk to me. On the day right before I was scheduled to be discharged, I zoned out entirely, just staring at him as he sat with his head bowed, hyper-focused on peeling an apple for me. The moonlight streaming into the room that night was stunningly bright, and an old movie about tragic lovers committing double suicide was playing softly on the ward television, surrounded by the sound of the actors crying hysterically on screen. I asked him a single, quiet question. "Do you genuinely love me?" He snapped his head up to look at me, a brilliant flash of hope igniting in his eyes, and without a single microsecond of hesitation, he nodded fervently. "I love you. I love you so much." Hearing that, my right hand reached up to tightly grip the diamond hexagram necklace resting against my throat. "If you really love me that much, I need to kill someone. Are you willing to help me do it?" Chapter 15. Julian leveraged his family's powerful connections, claiming that the Weston family was looking to invest in a major new educational venture, and formally inviting Richard Holt over to his house for dinner to discuss the deal. Since the two families had known each other casually for years, Holt didn't suspect a thing. Exactly 30 minutes past the agreed-upon meeting time, a sleek black sedan rolled to a stop outside the abandoned warehouse where I was waiting. Julian hauled the unconscious Richard Holt out of the back seat and carelessly dumped him onto the concrete floor. "You don't need to be involved in anything that happens next. Thank you for doing this. When I turn myself in, I promise I won't mention your name." I severed all our ties with flat, emotionless precision. He looked at me with hesitant agony, his expression steeped in profound sorrow. He clearly still couldn't bear watching me make this choice. "Serena, your brother is already gone. Why can't you just let the past go and start your life over again? Doing this will just..." Stop talking. This is exactly how it's supposed to be, isn't it? He brutally murdered my brother, so paying for it with his own life is only fair, right? It went far beyond just a sister's obsessive duty to avenge her sibling's murder. I was also thinking about everything else. Ever since we were little kids, I had always stood directly in front of him, beating away the older kids who tried to bully him, chasing out the spiders and roaches that terrified him, and wiping away his tears whenever he cried out for our parents. Because I did all those things, he always used to tell me that I was the bravest superhero sister in the entire world. So this time around, now that I finally knew the horrifying truth, shrinking away like a coward in front of him would be completely wrong, wouldn't it? This was exactly what had to be done. I dragged Richard Holt over and tightly bound him to a chair. I meticulously stripped his body of all his clothing, dug his phone out of his pants pocket, forced his thumb onto the screen, and unlocked it. I had a highly specific goal in mind. Hidden at the very bottom of his photo gallery was a heavily encrypted, locked folder. Once I hacked my way into it, I found exactly what I had expected, a nauseatingly massive collection of video recordings. It was practically guaranteed that a twisted monster like him would document his own crimes. Scrolling furiously downward, I finally landed on the videos from late spring of the year before last. After taking just a second to confirm what I was looking at, I clamped my eyes shut in numb revulsion. I grabbed a bottle of water from nearby and splashed it aggressively over his face, jolting him awake. He coughed and choked, his cloudy little eyes darting around in blind panic. Once his vision finally focused on me, he looked utterly bewildered. Who are you?" I didn't answer him, so he nervously scanned the empty warehouse before forcing a facade of calm authority, attempting to feel out the situation. Do we have some sort of disagreement between us? Do you remember Jeremy Avery?" At the mention of the name, his brow furiously furrowed together, and his shoulders subtly jerked as he desperately tried to break free from his restraints. It was a completely pointless struggle. I had tied the ropes so tight that the friction had drawn blood from my own palms. "I don't know who that is. I'm sure there's just been some huge misunderstanding here. I am his older sister. And you don't need to be so nervous. I just have a couple of questions I want to ask you." Only then, hearing exactly who I was and realizing there was no hope of escape, did his facade of composure finally shatter entirely, his massive body beginning to violently shake in the chair. Playing dumb was clearly a massive waste of time now. He knew exactly what kind of blood feud he was dealing with. His previously slumped head jerked wildly as he started frantically begging for his life, violently flicking drops of cold sweat into the air. "I'm so sorry. What happened to your brother was just a terrible, drunken mistake. If you want money to compensate for it, or if you want me to turn myself into the police, I'll completely cooperate with whatever you ask. As long as you just let me live, I will give you absolutely anything you want." I stared back at him with a dead, emotionless face, casually picking up the knife I had prepared beforehand from the table. Seeing that his pathetic bribery had absolutely zero effect on me, he aggressively pivoted to making threats. "You better think long and hard about this. If you actually do something crazy to me, you're the one who's going to end up rotting in prison. And all it takes is one single phone call from me, and I can have you quietly exterminated in Hartwell without anyone ever finding your body." I let out a freezing sneer, my hand pausing on the handle of the knife, entirely ignoring his pathetic bluster. Instead, my mind drifted straight back to the horrifying videos I had just discovered, and I finally asked my question. "I need you to tell me, besides what's saved on this phone right here, are there any other backup copies of those videos anywhere else?" His eyes noticeably darkened. He clearly knew exactly which videos I was talking about. The layers of fat on his face visibly trembled as rivers of cold sweat poured down his cheeks. He then shakily stuttered out his reply. "No, there aren't any others." Hearing that, I immediately raised my hand, and before his brain could even process what was happening, I mercilessly drove the blade straight into his right hand. Aya! In a split second, the empty warehouse was utterly flooded with his blood-curdling, agonizing screams. "Just tell me the goddamn truth and stop wasting my time." I looked down with absolute apathy as a geyser of thick blood sprayed out, pooling onto the concrete floor. Seeing that he was still refusing to answer, I raised my arm high again, taking dead aim at his left hand this time. In the house, on the second floor, the third study room on the left side of the hallway, in the very back of the bookcase, the second drawer down. The key is the smallest one on that keychain sitting right there on the floor. I turned my head to look down at the ring of keys, silently analyzing whether he was finally telling the truth. Once I was reasonably certain he wasn't lying, I nodded, then slowly raised the bloody knife once more. Seeing what was coming, he tried in utter terror to drag the heavy chair backward. You said if I answered your questions you would." His all-consuming terror of his impending death made him physically incapable of properly forming his words. But honestly, it really didn't matter, since they were going to be the last words he ever spoke anyway. I furrowed my brows in extreme annoyance. "Would what? Actually, never mind. Just keep your voice down, and maybe I'll try to make it quick." Chapter 16. By the time I finished thoroughly scrubbing the crime scene clean, it was already past 3 a.m. I shut off my phone screen, vividly aware that the clock was quickly running out on me. I critically needed to finalize a few important matters before turning myself over to the police. I checked into a cheap motel and took a fast, scalding shower. Immediately after, I arranged to meet up with Sophie. When she saw my face was still as pale as a ghost, her eyes filled with deep anxiety. "You have to start taking better care of yourself, even if there's absolutely no way for us to avenge him. You still can't keep wandering through life like a mindless zombie. It would break his heart to see you like this." I nodded gently and smoothed down a messy stray lock of her hair. I had zero intention of telling her what I had just done. Letting her believe it was just a stroke of divine justice would be vastly better for her. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out the gold bank card Julian had given me. I had dumped every single penny I owned onto it, rounding the balance out to an even $80,000. "I want you to take this card." She desperately tried to push it back toward me, but I firmly shook my head. "Sophie, you are one of the very few people in this world who ever genuinely treated the two of us well. To be honest, neither of us ever received much kindness growing up, so my way of paying you back might be incredibly clumsy. When we were little kids, our parents used to loudly scream that our very existence was a massive mistake and that we never should have been born at all. Back then, hearing those words just filled me with absolute terror. But lately, I keep finding myself wondering if children who are utterly despised by their own parents really don't belong in this world. And because of that, Even after thrashing around in the mud for 20 entire years, I was still just coated in absolute filth. The only person I desperately wanted to protect had been brutally ripped to shreds, and my frantic pursuit to somehow save him was nothing but a delusion. When all was said and done, all I had managed to do was scrape together a few extra years of life from a violently hostile world. Hearing my words, Sophie suddenly reached out and clamped her hands around mine, gripping so viciously hard that the skin around my wrists began to turn red. Don't you ever think like that? Getting to meet the two of you was the luckiest thing that has ever happened to me in my entire life. No one in this world is a mistake that shouldn't exist, especially not the two of you. I stared blankly at her for a second before curling my lips into a soft smile at the blazing determination in her eyes, even though it felt like she was just telling me a very kind, beautiful lie. The hands clamping down on mine were still nothing but brittle bones, and her clothes still just hung off her skeletal frame. If she had never met us, she would undoubtedly have lived a vastly brighter, happier life. The summer was officially drawing to a close, the frantic buzzing of the cicadas slowly fading away. I reached out and gently tucked a stray piece of hair behind her ear. Sophie, when this summer is over, I want you to go out and start your life over again. And completely forget about me and Jeremy. Chapter 17. Right after leaving Sophie, I immediately went to track down Camilla. She was sitting in a cafe, entirely zoned out as she aimlessly stirred the ice cubes floating in her drink. It was highly probable that her distraction was caused by her suddenly uncontactable father. While digging through his phone the night before, I had seen several incoming calls from her number pop up on the screen. I had methodically declined every single one of them. Her mother had died when she was very young, meaning she was raised entirely by him, making their bond undoubtedly much stronger than that of a normal father and daughter. I didn't bother engaging in any idle conversation with her. No matter how understandable her motivations were, we were ultimately still sworn enemies. Her stealing Jeremy's artwork was a solid, undeniable fact. So I merely slapped a cheap burner phone and the specific key to Richard's secret drawer down onto the table in front of her. Every other key from that ring had already been completely destroyed. The phone contained the exact audio clip of her father confessing to the brutal assault on Jeremy at the Aldevale Hotel, the horrifying video evidence ripped straight from his phone, and the exact location of the backup hard drives. It also contained clear photographs of Jeremy's early diary entries, the ones describing their genuinely happy interactions back when they first met. She stared at me in total confusion, entirely unable to grasp why I would randomly give her a burner phone. I lowered my eyes and let out a soft, mocking laugh. The passcode is Jeremy's birthday. I'm sure you still remember it, right? She immediately nodded and whispered the exact string of numbers under her breath. It seemed that everything she had tearfully confessed back at the coffee shop actually held a substantial degree of truth. After all, even after everything that happened, she still had his birthday memorized perfectly. Camilla, when Jeremy died, he only left behind 4 things in his trunk, and one of them was that vinyl record from the Grey Herons you bought for him. Once you open that phone and read what's inside, you will finally understand the complete truth of everything that happened. Right up until the end, he honestly thought of you as a truly wonderful friend. Goaded by my deliberate baiting, a look of manic, desperate anticipation flared up in her eyes, and she instantly snatched up the phone to unlock it. I didn't try to stop her, nor did I stick around to watch the fallout. Chapter 18. My plan was to go find a quiet place and finally sleep. And the minute I woke up, I would march straight into the police station and confess to the murder. That sleep was miraculously peaceful. By the time I finally cracked my eyes open, I had absolutely no idea how many hours had passed. I tapped my phone screen, my eyebrows pulling together aggressively as the blinding glare stung my eyes. But once my vision adjusted, I saw a massive news alert sitting right at the top of my lock screen. Gruesome dismemberment murder discovered in Hartwell's North Industrial District. Methods described as unimaginably brutal. Reading the headline, my heart remained entirely still. Not a single trace of the panic or anxiety you would expect from the actual killer. I just coldly scrolled through the text. The article officially confirmed the victim's identity as Richard Holt, chairman of the Holt Group and sitting member of the Harwick University Board of Directors. It also stated that the police were currently conducting a massive manhunt for the perpetrator. looking down at the wildly trending comments below the article. I have a buddy who works at the precinct, and he said one of the body parts was completely. This has to be one of the most sickeningly evil crimes committed in Hartwell in years. What kind of mind-blowing hatred drives someone to do something like that? I kept my head tilted down, swiping aimlessly through the comments without feeling a single shred of emotion. A few minutes later, I tossed the phone aside and started getting ready to walk to the police precinct. But exactly at that moment, a brand new breaking news alert violently hijacked my screen. Killer in Industrial District dismemberment case officially surrenders to police. My fingers instantly froze, and a deep, aggressive frown slashed across my face. What the hell was going on? I furiously tapped into the article, only to find that while it explicitly confirmed the killer had surrendered, the police had not released the suspect's actual name to the public. But Julian was the only other living soul on this planet who knew anything about the murder. He was the only possible answer. Did he actually? A terrifying, icy chill blasted down my spine. Right as panic began to set in, the phone clutched in my hand started ringing violently. Looking down, I saw it was Megan. Serena, where are you right now? Julian dropped off some things and told me I had to give them to you. Can you come pick them up right now? I fought to suppress the massive wave of chaos erupting in my mind, remaining silent for several long seconds before quietly answering the phone. Okay. Chapter 19. The items Julian had left behind for me consisted of exactly two things: a bank card and a handwritten note. Serena, I want you to go live abroad for a couple of years. I'm going to take the fall for this. Given my family's massive connections, they'll make sure my sentence is reduced to the absolute minimum. My dad might not give a damn about me, but he's terrified of public humiliation, so he'll move heaven and earth to bury this. You don't have to worry about me at all. Just think of this as me finally paying off the massive debt I owe you. Do not go turn yourself in. I wish you all the best. It was utterly impossible to accurately describe the storm of emotions ripping through my chest. It felt like the buzzing of cicadas was loudly roaring in my ears one second, only to fade into dead silence the next. It wasn't until the edge of the paper crumpled completely under my white-knuckled grip that I finally snapped back to reality. I stuffed the bank card deep into my pocket, violently shoved my emotions down into a locked box, and thanked Megan for her help. Stepping out past the university gates, I flagged down a passing taxi. The driver turned around and asked where I was heading. Take me to the North District Police. To the where? Actually, forget it. Take me to the cemetery. That night, I sat endlessly beside my brother's grave, refusing to move until the sun came up. The very next morning, I packed my bags and left the country for good. Chapter 20. Throughout all my years living overseas, my absolute sole purpose in life was continuously uploading new artwork to Jeremy's account. Fortunately, since I used to take on massive amounts of drawing commissions just to survive, I had some decent skills of my own, even if I could never truly match his God-given talent. But over the course of 5 grueling years, I still managed to pull in a massive number of new followers. And when the spring rolled around this year, I finally made the decision to return home. The absolute second my plane touched down in Hartwell, Sophie was waiting for me at the arrival gate, clutching a massive bouquet of tulips. She was now working as a massively successful, top-tier talent agent at a major entertainment company. The minute we sat down face-to-face in a nearby cafe, tears aggressively flooded her eyes. I never thought I would actually get to see you again. Thank you. Thank you so incredibly much for everything you did. Her voice violently cracked with emotion, and after sobbing uncontrollably for nearly a minute, she finally managed to tell me that ever since Richard Holt was killed all those years ago, her crippling depression had vanished entirely, as if the very root of her illness had been physically ripped out of her. She had finally stopped wandering like a mindless ghost trapped in the past, completely numb and drowning in her own regret. Hearing that lifted a massive weight off my chest. Just like I used to do back in the day, I reached out and gave her shoulder a comforting pat. It genuinely made me so happy to see that she had finally put on some healthy weight. Just then, as if she had suddenly remembered something important, Sophie ducked her head and dug a bank card out of her purse, forcefully pushing it across the table toward me. There's $140,000 on this card. It's my entire salary from the last 5 years, plus the original 80,000 you gave me. I saved every single penny of it. Please don't try to reject this. You absolutely have to take it. I refused to take it. Seeing my rejection, she stubbornly slammed it down onto the table right next to my hand. Then, she quickly launched into updating me on everything that had happened over the past 5 years. She told me that after Julian turned himself in, he somehow managed to secure a formal letter of forgiveness from the victim's family, which essentially meant a letter of forgiveness from Camilla. Following that, his outrageously wealthy family hired the most ruthless, top-tier defense attorneys in the country and dragged out old hospital records diagnosing him with severe bipolar disorder. Because of that massive mountain of mitigating circumstances, he only ended up getting sentenced to 10 years in prison. As for Camilla, for absolutely no decipherable reason, she had suffered a total, violent psychotic break shortly after her father's brutal murder 5 years ago. She was now permanently locked up in a psychiatric ward, though every single year at the end of spring, she was supposedly taken to the cemetery to visit the graves. Listening to all this, I merely gave her a subtle, quiet nod. Hearing those names brought up again felt profoundly bizarre. They were both strangely familiar and entirely alien, like people I had only vaguely known in a past life. My subconscious violently pushed back against them, desperately wanting to ignore their existence entirely. As our long conversation finally drew to a close, I decided to playfully ask her about her love life. So, have you dated anyone at all over these past 5 years? Her eyes noticeably dimmed, and she nervously crossed her hands, rubbing them together. No. Why not? Because the boy I met when I was young was just too incredibly bright and perfect. Chapter 21. Deep into the night, the evening breeze drifted gently through the open window. I logged into the account and uploaded one of the beautiful winter landscape paintings that Jeremy had left behind. Right below the artwork, I added a single line of text. The caption read, "In another life, I hope you get to live one that's entirely your own." The end.